Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Anna Maria DiDio. That's how I pronounce it, right?
That's correct. Yes.
I did do some sleuthing to make sure that. I was trying to avoid having to ask you the question, but then again, I
Thank you.
asked anyway. Um, now I've said it once. I'm fine. I'm not going to refer to it at all. So we're done. It's just Anna Maria from now on. Uh, listeners, Anna Maria is a mum. She's got two daughters, one of who joined her family from through adoption from was it South America, Me
Mexico.
Mexico, yeah, and she was six. So it's
Yes,
six
it's almost seven. Yes.
when she joined your family, and she's also a great author. Created some great books to explain adoption to kids. Um, and delightful illustrations. I'm guessing that you use the same illustrator each time, right?
For the three children's books. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, because there's a recognizable
Yes.
style. It's great. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today, Anna Maria.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. So thriving, what does thriving mean to you?
Thriving, really the ability to be uh, at peace with yourself, happy in the place where you are, enjoying the things you enjoy, and looking forward to the future.
And what have you? I love the breadth of it, of that definition. You talked about pe peace and happiness. Are you meaning, and you put those two words next to each other, do you mean by happy, do you mean more of a contented
Yes.
rather than the kind of ecstatic? That would be kind of more in line with the peace, the peace of,
Self-acceptance. Yes.
sorry,
Self-acceptance is
self-acceptance.
self-acceptance. Just that you're comfortable with yourself.
Yeah. Okay. And what, because different people mean different things by self. And I find that fascinating, right? So there's the uh, like self-esteem, which is presumably something about pride. Self-awareness is something about being aware of our behavior. And when we're out of kilter, where we're acting from our inner child, shall we say. And then you've got people like, we often name check Richard Schwartz from IFS, which is the therapy modality. He talks about the uppercase S self, the one that is that essence of us that is untouched by our trauma. So, what do you mean by self?
Kind of a combination of of all of those things. I mean, when I think of self, I'm thinking of uh, my natural state, my the contentment that I spoke of, and the ability to look forward into life with anticipation and happiness.
Yeah. So you talked about natural state. So you're talking about our nature. Is that how you would see it?
Our nature, yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So how do you see what trauma does to that nature?
Well, I see trauma so deeply embedded in self that many times it's not even recognized. And this is really what prompted me to write the books, because my daughter had behaviors that I was not quite understanding until I understood a little bit more about trauma. And some of these behaviors, I think, were began so young and started at so deep a level that they've been maintained through many years, even into her adulthood. And it's been my life challenge to understand them, cope with them, help her, and be there for her as she navigates life.
Yeah. Had she been? It was an orphanage. Is that right?
Yes,
If I remember rightly. So yeah. So had she been in that orphanage for quite a long time?
since she was a baby. Yes.
Wow. And what? So this is. Uh, I know both. You said one of your daughters is just turning 30. There's 31. So this is Mexico in
1995.
1995. So what sort of state? Uh, What sort of state was the orphanage in? What sort of level of care
Yes.
was she enjoying or not enjoying? What was it like? What paint us a picture of the orphanage?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question because I had, anxiety over that. What was this environment going to be like? So we visited the orphanage several times, actually through the years. But initially, when we visited, we were struck by the level of care that was given to the children. Now, there were like 30, 40 children. So I'm not sure the staff and child ratio, but my daughter was particularly close to one caregiver, and they refer to the caregivers as tias. And this tia loved my daughter, and was just so captivated by her, and really took care of her. So I was not really. I think that's where she learned about love at a very young age because of that. But then the separation and ultimate relocation to the United States at 7, rocked her world for the second time. Um, and
Or maybe even the third time. Maybe the third time after the loss of her biological mother, then the loss of her
mother,
Tia.
Tia, and then and then the relocation
Yeah.
to our family, which approaching that, of course, I had only good thoughts and wonderful thoughts, and just this was the completion of our family. This is what I had dreamed about. And when her behavior told me the opposite story, I really began to delve into this concept of trauma.
Yeah.
And
And
so ever since.
yeah, and you mentioned on your website, um, did you say rocked by infertility? I'm not sure exactly what. Did you say devastated by infertility? How was that trauma? How do you kind of capture that trauma? How do you sum up that?
Well, when I first became aware of my infertility issues, I sank into a bit of a depression, and that led ultimately to my divorce, and and wondering if I would ever have a family. So then, years went by. I met my now husband, and the infertility continued, but then the treatments continued. We ultimately were successful and had a beautiful baby girl. But then adding to the family at that point was, by then I was, in my 40s, so it was not going to happen again.
Yeah, yeah. So what did you learn about yourself through the presumably there was some did you undergo some training before you adopted your daughter from Mexico?
Yes, we did, but I will describe the training as, just very surface. And again, it was only after seeing her behavior that didn't match what we had been promised in the training
Yeah.
that I thought, what is going on here? And when I became familiar with primal wound and some of the other literature around trauma, I saw the exact description of my daughter's behavior just listed in these books. And I was I just for me it was a relief because it was not, and this is something I've been struggling with for many years. It's not really some of the things that happened in our family, or my daughter's reactions to things, or her disassociation with the family was really a lot of trauma speaking to us, and I tried not to take it personally was the issue.
Yeah. I think I've heard other adoptive parents say the same thing. It's the idea is the central idea is really, really hard, and it's exactly what you just said. Not taking our kids' trauma personally. It's yeah. Um, I felt a relief reading The Primal Wound as well. Um, and then it morphed into something else where I I kind of saw it as a doom laden thing, like a life sentence, actually, if you were like, and that would be at complete odds with your definition of thriving, which included this looking forward. Well, when I read The Primal Wound after the initial relief, I wasn't I wasn't looking forward to a life sentence. You know, I had a life sentence, and I kind of thought I was stuck with it until I realized that I wasn't. Did you read the follow-up book?
Uh, Skim the follow-up book. It was very intensive research, and I had moved into kind of another direction, and started reading more memoirs and more personal stories.
Yeah, okay. Because the the first book seems to be far more popular than the second one,
Oh,
and
definitely.
and but the second one's supposedly about healing. I mean, I find it. I did read it. Uh, I I found it fiendishly complex and totally psychological. And when I look at the number, but I don't know what the numbers are in terms of sales for those two books, but I can delude that I think there's something. I might have the numbers wrong here, but the number of reviews for the first book, let's say there are 100. The number of reviews for the second book is something like 5. It's a 1 to 20 ratio. It's something like that, and I might be off. I should have been. I checked my facts, and I find that fascinating because if we thought the first book was so good, uh, which is about describing, defining the trauma, and then she comes up with a book about healing the trauma. Surely everybody that had liked the first book so much would have bought the second book. And what? Why? Why are the ratios so different? These are some of the strange questions that I ask myself.
Well, you answered it though in terms of the the presentation um, of her theme of healing is presented in such a complex way that she lost her audience. And I think that parents in their search for understanding this very complicated topic, the primal wound, the logic of the primal wound made so much sense. And then your brain was anticipating something to counter that, and the book presents pages and pages of her complicated research, and that's really not where parents' heads
Yeah.
were.
Yeah.
And so, I transitioned to reading more about resilience and understanding how that can be applied, or how key that is to healing. And
Yeah.
as I've watched my daughter grow through the years, who kind of through no fault of her own has also experienced trauma as she grew and developed, and just watched her amazing resilience and ability to cope with these other things. And maybe you didn't ask this question, but I'll answer it. That she has that resilience and has not anywhere near accepted her life sentence, and has moved on to just wonderful and great things in her life.
Yeah. So what does resilience mean to you? What have you learned about resilience? Because you went down
Yeah,
that road.
resilience. Well, from what I've seen, resilience is just the tremendous ability to take stock of the current situation, and that where you find yourself. And again, I'm thinking of some of my daughter's experiences, and then call upon the skills you you have, the skills you've practiced, the skills that your loved ones are supporting you, and meeting those challenges, meeting that state head on, and getting to live another day, succeeding at whatever your trial is, and moving on with hope, and I'll I'll say happiness, but
Yeah. But we're talking about peace and contentedness rather than ecstatic joy, right? Um, so uh, what did you learn? You talked mentioned briefly depression. What did you learn about your own resilience through depression?
well, I've always known that I'm very goal oriented and focused, and the well, I have a corporate HR background, and for many years I've done employee training in leadership development and all those things. So I'm a very big believer in controlling the controllables. I'm sure you've heard that. There's many
Yeah.
variations of it now, but and just doing what is within my control that I can do to further the goal that I have. And I've done that with every single part of my life, and have achieved the things that I've set out to do, that I have that goal I've achieved. I mean,
Yeah.
there's certain things I would love to do, um, but I know it'll never happen. And but things that where I can break that down to a set of achievable goals, I've completed those things.
Yeah. So I mean, depression means different things to different people. I remember looking at a diagnosis for depression, and it was 10 different things, and all of them were stacked full of uh, vagary. Vagary. It was completely vague, and I think anybody on a bad day could tick five, six, seven of them. Like it. So I think depression looks like, I think, well, there's a thing, don't they call it clinical depression? Um, and what did your depression manifest like?
It was stuck. It was stuck in mud. stuck that I would never get out of this situation. I was faced with many obstacles. I didn't know where to start. And it just was a long process of taking each one of those things and, listing them and tackling them. My marriage, my job, my ability to get pregnant, um, who I loved, what I wanted to do with my life, and so all of that kind of came crashing in when uh, when I had my first miscarriage and just realized my whole world needed to change.
Yeah. Because people mention infertility a lot in terms of trauma, and I've I've not I've not experienced that myself, or my wife hasn't experienced that. Uh, but we have had friends that have had miscarriages, and it seems to me like infertility may be one thing, but a miscarriage is totally blows that out of the water in terms of how it seems to me to be. It's a it's a big huge deal. The word infertility doesn't ring loads of alarm bells for me, but the word miscarriage clearly clearly does. So you talked about being confused, and then you're also talking about controlling the controllables, and this action focus. Can you put those two things together for me? Because it seems a bit of the challenge. It's challenging me a bit to see those two things in the same chapter of your life, if you like.
Well, because I felt so stuck, I started to, take inventory of the things that would get me unstuck. And that began with, well, first I was in a therapy
Yeah,
with my ex-husband, then
yeah,
husband, but now ex-husband.
yeah,
First we were, is this marriage, what's happening with this marriage? Where are we going? What are we doing? And so, I mean, these things took time to unravel, but I approached kind of each one of them with a goal of, getting my head straight, and devoted time and energy into, my marriage, what I was going to do, uh, in terms of that. And that was really the beginning, because I was not going to stay with this person and have a child. I needed to, make that decision, and the clock is ticking, so to speak. So
yeah.
I knew that it had to be, the decisions had to be made. And at the same time, my company was closing. So that was really another thing I didn't even mention. My company was sold, and I was being laid off. So I did get another job, and so it was time to get used to the new job. So there was a lot going on, and and then very quickly, I within a year, I did meet my now husband, and we became serious, and I
The
knew that.
rest, the rest is history. So, what did you learn about yourself through that transition time when everything's coming at you?
Well, I knew that those strengths that had served me well all through, high school, college, and uh, beginning my adult working career, continued to serve me well, and that is the ability to focus on specific goals with an end in mind and work towards that. So
Yeah.
that's what happened.
I- in the messiness, you looked for order
Yes,
and progress.
and when, of course, when I remarried, the infertility, continued, and so the task became finding a infertility specialist, diagnosing what was wrong. And fortunately for me, I picked the right person. He knew immediately what needed to happen. I had surgery actually twice. And and then within, I was married in 91 and my daughter was born in 94. So it was not immediate, but
Yeah.
it was all working towards that.
So the word that's coming to my mind is persistence.
True too. Yeah.
Yeah. What else? Creativity? I don't know, problem solving? What other things are were big? What other themes characterize that part of your life?
Well, yeah, the creativity, the resilience is evidenced by, and resilience um, enabled with my ability to set goals and execute them. I think
Yeah.
again, my focus. Uh, I've done that strengths finders test. I, many times in my corporate life, and the strengths for goals and focus, ability to accept
Yeah.
change and navigate it, and all those things have really served me well in planning out my family.
Yeah. So resilience is a bit of a pet topic of mine, and whenever I get anywhere near it, the question for that goes on for me is is it discovered? Is it uncovered? Is it strengthened? Is it realized? Because people selling us resilience training courses will pitch us along the following lines. Uh, well, they'll pitch us along a skill line. They'll say, "I was just like you. Um, I didn't. I was struggling to see my own resilience until I was struggling with dealing with what was going on in the world until I discovered X, Y, Z. Spend this money with me, spend this time with me, and I will help you strengthen your resilience." That's how the pitch. That's the sort of pitch I've seen for resilience. So, what's your take on resilience? Is it strengthened? Is it seen? Is it realized?
I think
What do you say?
resilience, the knowledge and awareness and recognition of resilience, I think comes after the fact. So it's sort of a backwards diagnosis. I think you have to have the skill sets of resilience first before you label yourself as resilient. So in order to execute resilience, you have to, take complete inventory of what's happening. Again, what can you control? How have you focused on that goal? What efforts have you taken to achieve the goal that you've outlined for yourself? So, but in mapping that out and doing all those things, and then when you've achieved it, you kind of look back and say, oh, I was so resilient. Look how I've bounced back and done X, Y, and Z. Well, again, it's sort of, you have to do all those things first, and then you can say, ta-da, I was resilient.
Yeah,
I don't think you announce yourself as resilient first. You kind of prove it first and then say, yeah,
yeah,
I did it.
yeah. I like that. I like that take on it. The bit that pops out for me is and I totally agree. I think it's realized after the fact. We go into something worrying how we're going to get through it. Somehow we get through it, and then we look back on it, and it's after the fact. I I totally get that, and I'm 100% with you on that. The one bit that I find fascinating is it's the I guess it's the nature nurture thing, right? Is it because you said you talked about the words resilience skills. So that's kind of more learned stuff. That's a skill is a learned thing rather than something that's innate. Um, how do you see how do you see that?
I do see it as learned because I will share with you some of the natural tendencies that I saw in my daughter and she had some challenges, obviously, coming from Mexico, not being able to read. How was she going to fit in this, 98% white school district, coming from Mexico and having different, she's had a little bit of an accent, even when she forgot all of her Spanish and learned. So
And missing Tia, right? Missing the Tia. That must have been
that was on
before.
top. So, yeah, exactly. And so I would be there supporting her as much as I could, but with, again, controlling the controllables, action items. And she would be, down in the dumps. I said, time to put on your sneakers. We're going to go for a walk. We're going to do this X, Y, and Z. Let me see your homework. I mean, there were a lot of things that she was very happy just to do nothing. And and maybe that's a kid's nature. And sometimes she was so sad. And so, I wasn't trying to do any heavy duty diagnosis, but I was there a lot to, be consistent with the family routine, come up with we cooked many things together. I tried to make her childhood favorite things, and I never quite measured up to
Yeah.
the Tia food, but
No.
it's a matter of having someone to support you with strategies. and and I can say overall, eventually she did these things on her own. Go for a run. um, Maybe she knew we'd be checking her homework, so she did her homework. It was kind of a family effort, a team effort, but she knew we were there for her.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you said then that your daughter didn't want to do anything. And when you mentioned about your own depression, the thing that popped into my head, a stereotypical view of depression would be somebody that's locked away in the room, doesn't want to get out of bed. That's sort of which is at odds with their kind of go-getter, objective focused career person that you just run. So that's I think that's why where I saw the disconnect.
I had learned that already. Someone was there for me. I mean, I was already, by the time I had that miscarriage, I was already in my 30s and had a, what I'll call, a improving but somewhat successful career. I already had to be present, very present in my career and my studies. I already had my master's degree. So I had learned all of those things. And so
Yeah,
then when the challenge of my whole idea of a family falling apart, when I had to accept, yes, you have a diagnosis of infertility and you may never have a family. I knew how to, but she, did not know. She, it's important to have those parents involved that are teaching you that, and
yeah.
things can be learned.
So yeah, so you needed to model it for her, really? Is that
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah? Was there a point where you saw, because I was listening to a clip of your audiobook on your website, um, and it was about a fight between the girls, and you also talk about the uh, your younger daughter kind of miss being incredibly homesick. It's like homesick is a complete understatement. It was bigger than that, but that's the only word that pops into my head. Maybe you've got a better word because you're a writer, right? So if how would you have a different word to it other than homesick, or was it?
No, and I think that adequately
It
describes.
does it, yeah, yeah. So was there a point at which you saw, was there a turning point at which you saw something starting to click for your younger daughter?
You know what? I'll totally cop out here and say yes and no, because there were many small victories that I saw as significant. And in the beginning, of course, was the hardest. And we all tried to support as much as we could. And I was not sure if she would just continue to cry and just, hate us and not cooperate in school, or, but one night we got in the car and she buckled her seatbelt and said, "Where are we going?" And it was her first sentence in English, and I just almost fell out of my out of the car. And it was a signal to me that she was trying to learn English to be a part of this family and and
Yeah,
be there. It was so amazing. And we took a little vacation together, and the girls played in the ocean and went, ate ice cream together, and it was just really lovely. So that was the very beginning. And we backtrack 1,000 times from that, but
yeah,
there were spots every once in a while that were, and she began to make friends, and the ESL teacher that she had, they formed a tremendous bond, and she really looked forward to going to school and doing well. So it happened so gradually, but those little
yeah.
moments were so memorable.
So ESL is English as a second language, is it? Is that what I mean? Yeah. Okay.
Like, I don't think they call it that anymore in the schools, maybe English development language or something, but it was ESL at the time.
Yeah, yeah. So if when you kind of look back on this, is it trauma that gets in the way of our thriving? How do you see the relationship between how you describe thriving and what you've learned about trauma? Because you've clearly done your homework.
Well, her trauma was her, um, again, embedded so deep that her communication patterns were established so early on. And even, let's start with the number one trauma. Even those communication skills at the orphanage consistently prevailed, I'm telling you, till she's 30 years old. And that is sometimes disassociation from the family, pulling back just a little bit, or not being truthful with us about what's happening. So there's this, protection mechanism that, again, it is embedded so deep in her. I'm wondering if it'll ever change, but it was learned very early on at the orphanage, as the kids, and I'll say in a benign way, perhaps wanted to keep their games and toys a secret, or sneak away from the tias or something. So it was a different dynamic, but it has persisted for many, many years. And it's, again, and for years I've struggled with not taking it personally, but
Yeah,
something that I'm still getting used to.
yeah. So that we mentioned that at the outset, didn't we, about not taking our kids' trauma personally? And it's one of those things that's really easy to say and a lot harder to do. What have you learned about that?
That instinctively I still do, but I can, again, control that. Like, okay, no, you're getting into some negative territory here, and what it forces me to think about the best way to handle things, and the healthiest way to respond, or the way to reestablish connection, or so it's constantly on my mind. And I'm just, I was want to be there and supportive, and I continue to learn.
Yeah. So an awareness.
But yes,
It's
that's
an awareness thing, yeah. Um, and is it that the other thing that came to me as you were describing it, it was that kind of difference between uh, reacting and responding. I don't know where I picked that up along the way, but so it's our response. So our reaction is often a trauma reaction,
Exactly.
whereas it's that beat that beat taking a beat and then responding with a little more clarity.
Clarity and grace. Clarity and grace that says, I know you, I see you. And I'm without without saying it, I know you, I see you. I'm going to give you time to tell me what you really need to tell me, or um, think about what we're doing here. And so anyway, it's a reflective thing. Back to her.
Yeah,
If I find that again this communication mechanism is taking over
yeah.
our relationship.
What about grace for yourself?
It, it's an ongoing struggle.
Yeah.
Always
Is that
wondering about
harder? Is that harder, Anna? When you,
because I have the advantage of second guessing everything I've ever done. Like I go back, oh, I should have done
yeah,
it. I should have done that. But the key though now is I can say at 30 and 31, I, I mean, she has both of them have achieved great things and are contributing to the world. Um, my my younger daughter, my adopted daughter, is I don't want to reduce things to one sentence, but she's a giver. She's a giver. Um, she's worked in professions where she's given back, focused on um, others, not herself, and she's just a tremendous human being.
fantastic. How has what you've learned uh, permeated your books?
Well, the lessons learned, I decided about 5 years ago that I wanted to write about them and communicate to parents, because obviously trauma is not something anyone is looks forward to or is happy about. But I keep reading. We talked about some of the adoption uh, Facebook groups and memoirs and comments and articles, and I see so many adoptees wondering and struggling with this trauma all through adulthood. And I wanted to create a space and a message to parents of younger children without actually saying this is trauma, this is trauma, this is trauma, but open the space for them to talk about allowing their child to wonder, you know, who am I really? Where did I come from? Who do I look like? What are special maybe mannerisms or ways of thinking that just belong to me and not to this family? And that's okay. And reinforce that and rejoice in it, and um, just support their adopted children in ways perhaps they haven't done. And I began the writing journey thinking about the myth of adoption, and honestly I see this is maybe a little bit of a selfish comment on my part, but I see those books about adoption being all butterflies and fairy tales being the most popular, and it's really hard. My books focus on some of the deeper questions that children have and will continue to have about their origin story, about their identity, and those books are not as popular. But I think every child deserves that kind of conversation.
Yeah, it's the same for podcasts.
you know it well. Yes. I was
the
thinking,
the podcasts that are about stories are more popular than the podcasts that are about learnings. And I think one of the reasons is people want to switch off. They want to be uh, they want to feel validated by somebody else's story. They want to be distracted from their own story.
well, but in listening to a story, perhaps if the learning comes, I'd be happy. But that's where the rub is. And I think I told you when we started chatting that maybe before the podcast started that I'm transitioning into a speaking career, wanting to share our story, more about our story, in the hopes that some of these lessons learned can be conveyed more easily to parent and parent groups. And I hope to expand that. I'm writing a middle grade series of books now, perhaps so older kids get a chance to think about these topics and wonder. uh, 8 to 12 year olds. And I hope, again, transition to the speaking career and share more of my personal story to parent groups and get them uh, thinking about the topic as well.
Yeah. Have you come across any of these kind of hybrid books that are by hybrid, I mean they're written by adoptees. They are kind of part memoir, part self-help, or yeah, part memoir, part self-help. Have you come across any of those?
I've read about them, but in my author group, that's a very popular, technique now that uh, Amazon's not so keen on these on workbooks, so to speak, but pairing a memoir or some sort of perhaps even a nonfiction book with like a workbook is a very popular thing right now.
Yeah. I haven't seen any of those. I haven't seen any of those workbooks in the adoptee space, but I haven't looked at it that closely. What I mean was, so there's a guest, Danielle Godet. Have you come across Danielle, adoptee? She has written a book, and the first half is about this kind of like the stories and the learnings, and then the second half isn't a workbook, but it's more like a
Oh, like a
self-help guide sort of stuff. Yeah.
journal, a self-help journal.
It's not a journal. It's more like a manual, more like a kind of like try this stuff manual. It's a long time since I listened to it, so I apologize, Danielle, if you're listening, because I'm not doing it quite, but I justice to it. But I wonder if there's a space for that. I wonder if there's a space for that. A lot of the kids, Disney, you know, Disney's films are edutainment, and Pixar, there's that what's it, Inside Out, is it called? Like the cartoon character with all the the all the kind of the characters in this little girl's head, and I think she's I I watched it, and it's at a transition point. The little girl's moving to a different state, I think, with her. So I wonder if there is space for that for teens, some more overt learning opportunities, self-development opportunities alongside it. I think that's by the by. I'm distracting us. So we're kind of coming up on time here, Anne Maria. Is there anything that you'd like to share that I have not asked you about?
Just that the writing journey for me started with a memoir, and I entitled it "Love at the Border." Obviously referring to Mexico as the border, but just my image and my when I tried to kind of conjure up those feelings that I had when my daughter first joined our family. Her love just could only take her so far, and then we needed to get to the next border, and it just was such an apt description that I really enjoyed writing it, and would love to hear reader reactions. All of the information is described on my website, amdidio.com. That's amdidio.com. And as I said, now I'm writing a middle grade series about someone named Grace. And Grace is a smart kid who moves to a new city and meets a boy who's adopted.
Uh,
And his parents wanted desperately to keep the adoption secret, but he sets out on a secret mission with Grace to try and discover who his biological mother is.
yeah.
So,
Sounds great.
yeah.
And as always, listeners, check out the show notes if you're driving or walking and you haven't remembered Anna Maria's website. There'll be links to that in the show notes. We always do that. So um, yeah, and I haven't done this for a while, but it feels for some reason it feels right to do it now. Is there anything you want to ask me?
I guess I'm just curious, where are you on your journey in terms of adoption healing? Your story about finding your teddy bear and some of the things I've read over the years. Uh, you've done a lot of research and talking and writing, and I'm just curious, how are you doing?
Well, is the short answer. It's 18 years since I came out of the fog, as we say, became aware of the trauma that we haven't seen before because it's so embedded, as you said earlier on. I thought that that was a good word for it, really, embedded. I started with some EMDR therapy and stuff just as an exploration thing about 2 years ago, maybe a little bit less than that. And had an interesting experience with a therapist who I'd seen a few times, and she she told me that she was thinking of packing it in, but that she wouldn't leave me in the lurch. So we booked the next slot. It was just before Christmas, and then I booked a slot for the 4th of January, which is my birthday. So like a birthday present to myself, really. But I was seeing her every couple of weeks anyway. And anyway, on the 3rd of January, I got an email from no, a text message from her saying, "I've enjoyed working with you, Simon, but I can't work with you anymore." And I and it didn't bother me. So I saw that as a sign of some ongoing healing, but also a sign of complete. I'm a man of my word. If I, largely speaking, if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And I don't fob people off. I would never do that to somebody. I wouldn't say book a meeting. Yeah. But if you're a therapist, then you don't. So anyway, so after that, I started thinking about this, and what had led me, what was going on for me was I'd spoken to quite a few adoptees who are therapists, and they say, well, uh, talk therapy doesn't work with pre-verbal trauma. So you've got to look at something like EMDR or somatics or something like that. So for the last year and a half, maybe, yeah, I've been seeing a somatic experiencer. Started off seeing her face to face, driving an hour and a half to see her. I could only find one within an hour and a half radius of driving from me, which is interesting because there's loads of therapists. But in terms of somatic experiences, they're as rare as hen's teeth, as we say in Yorkshire
I'm
and the Brit.
familiar with that, what you're saying. I'm not familiar with that.
Sorry?
I'm not familiar with what you're saying, somatic experience.
Somatic experiencing, right? So you use the word embedded. So what I'm talking about, uh, so it's embedded in the body.
Mm.
Soma, I think, is Latin or Greek for body. So somatic experiencing is about releasing the subconscious trauma that's embedded in our bodies. So I've been doing that for a year and a half or so, and uh, and I'm enjoying that and getting a lot from that. So that's kind of where I am. But I'm looking at residual stuff, and I'm looking at where I'm looking for me. I'm looking at where I'm underestimating it. So one of the big I saw Blanche last week before, and I was saying to her, I'm underestimating it, and she was saying, well, don't go looking for it. Let it let it come out. Let it come out. Perhaps I'm overestimating it. So here we are. It's an ongoing stuff. And I listen to podcasts and audiobooks a couple of hours a day when I'm walking the dog and I'm in the car. So it's lifelong learning for me, which sounded like rubbish when I heard it when I was 20, because I mean, school was okay for me. I didn't really like it. I really, didn't really dislike it. I disliked college. I thought that was crap. Uh, the format, the lecture format, just didn't suit my learning style. That's a nicer way of putting it. I liked some of the seminar stuff, but anyway, so lifelong learning on the back of what I'd learned at university, it wasn't going to be a thing, but I see this big thing, right? The look at healing on two levels. On one level, we're healing forever, learning forever, and at a deeper level, we are always whole. And that seeing our wholeness makes us less scared of our feelings, or makes me less scared of our feelings anyway. So,
Sounds great.
yeah.
And I also wanted to take a moment and say thank you because we had I had tried to get in touch before your adoptee focus, and then when that concluded, or when you had transitioned then to more open, you reached back to me, and I thought that was really tremendous. So I really want to thank you for doing
Yeah,
that. I really enjoyed the conversation. I follow what you do,
you do. Yeah.
and I really looked forward to this, and it really was a tremendous discussion. So thank you.
Thank you. Likewise. And thank you, listeners. You're over an hour in, you're still listening. So thank you. Um, and we'll speak to you very soon. Take care.